What is up guys, Coach Leo here, and patch 25.23 has just dropped this morning, and let me tell you, I'm excited as this is one of the biggest patches in terms of shaking up the jungle meta. We have 8 new off-meta junglers getting direct buffs to their clear speed. So in this video, we'll be exploring which of these champions could actually be strong, or are they kind of just bait buffs? As well as this, we're going to be talking about the current 6 best solo queue junglers to play to Diamond, as well as some other very solid and underrated options that you could play. If you don't know who I am, my name is Coach Leo. I am a ex-pro player and challenger jungler, and for the past year, I've been helping hundreds of players just like you achieve their rank goals. If reaching your potential is something you are interested in, head on over to junglegath.gg for more information. Alrighty, so jumping into the tier list now, before we get talking about any of these new junglers that the patch has to offer, I want to quickly go over what I think and what the win rates are showing are the strongest junglers right now to climb to Diamond. So these are win rates below Diamond. And from my own opinion, coaching for the past almost 2 years now, what kind of champions will get you to Diamond? So obviously, if you don't see your champion here, that does not mean, that you can't climb on that champion. I've only got what I think are the strongest right here, right now. And we have 2 different categories for that. So in this first category here, I'm going to be going through 3 champions in the low skill expression. So these are champs that, you don't need to have a crazy amount of games on. They kind of just play themselves, and I would say they're kind of like the strongest junglers in my opinion. If I was to recommend a player to play some champion to get them to Diamond, I would recommend these 3 champs. And so these are champions that although, a little bit more boring, as I just said, they play themselves out. These are the champions that just throughout, the win rates throughout the patches, especially Mundo is a kind of a new one here. These are the champions that you're gonna be looking for. So Amumu is just a staple. The thing about Amumu is that it really gets you to learn the game's fundamentals and gets the clearing fundamentals. So, Amumu is a champion that you can really stick to just clearing, full clear, press ult, make a play, reset, full clear, fight drag, make a play, press ult, etc, etc. So that's what kind of makes Amumu keep this kind of like S rank spot in terms of the current, and his win rates, if you just check them, are crazy throughout pretty much every elo until around like Diamond or maybe even Emerald, where it starts to drop off a little bit. Yeah, super solid pick. Probably will always be a super solid pick. Something to also mention is that Sunfire got a slight buff. So tanks are having a little bit of an easier time. I still think that you would be building Landry's as Amumu. But however, Sunfire is now actually a more viable option for tanks, which is quite nice. Next up, we have Briar. Briar, again, throughout all the patches, her win rate is still really solid. I think that Briar is quite a simple champion, but you do need to learn her limits. However, I would highly recommend this champion, especially for new junglers. But honestly, you can play Briar until Diamond. Just like kind of a sleeper pick that not many people think about either. And she kind of just ticks all the boxes in terms of good clear, good gank, good item power spikes. Titanic Cleaver, I've been absolutely destroyed by that build many times. Obviously there are some other builds that you can do, but she's very versatile. She's just good across the board. Moving on now to Mundo. Now Mundo is, one of those champs that I think has been slept on for a while. However, Natty and these kind of junglers kind of popularizing him a bit. There's a lot of content around Mundo. Mundo is another one of those champs where you can just stick to a very easy structure. Full clear, kind of like full clear to bot. He has an insanely fast clear speed. He's not too difficult, I would say. Ona's first timing him on the world stage. So if Ornn can first time him, so can you. I would say that he does take a little bit more of limit pushing. So really knowing how to use your ult, really knowing how much damage you can kind of soak is kind of like the biggest thing you have to think about when playing Mundo. Apart from that, a super easy full clear to bot stack drags, hit your 1 or 2 item power spike, and then just kind of like run people over. So now we enter this other little category here where I have another 3 champions that I'm recommending, which is the S tier OTP champion. So this is where high skill expression is something that I'm going to be talking about. So these are champions that, if you want to kind of flex, if you want to carry the game, if you want to outplay people and really, out micro people and, mechanics and just take over the game, these are the 3 champions that I would recommend to Diamond. So you have some different options here. Obviously you have Master Yi. I think this champion is super good if you put time into him. So again, these are all champions that, at the start, they may not pay off as much as you want. However, the more you play them and the better you become at them, their payoff is really high. So Master Yi win rates right now, they're nothing spectacular. It actually does increase, the high MMR you get around like Platinum and Emerald. And I'm guessing this is just because Platinum Emerald players have slightly better micro, and Master Yi is quite a micro intensive champion. However, if you are very good at the micro on Master Yi, right? If you know your limits again, and if you know how much damage you can do, if you know how to farm really well, if you know how to team fight and how to wait out abilities, and a little more skill expression is needed. but he is just a super carry. So I would highly recommend Master Yi if that's kind of like your style. Moving on to Viego. Viego is a bit of a staple. I wasn't really sure whether to put Viego in the A tier or in the, low skill, but I actually think that Viego does require, he's a fighting champ. Okay, so the more you fight with Viego, the more skill expression that you have, the more situational, you know how to play different things. Although most of the time you can just play a bit more front to back. I think Viego is not as hard as like a Master Yi. I think Master Yi is actually very, very hard. But yeah, he's always just going to be here because, as well as the fact that this champion is so popular, but still keeps up his pretty good win rates throughout all the different ranks, bronze or iron to diamond. Yeah, he's just a champion that, also throughout any meta that you play, no matter what the meta, I feel like Viego is always a really great champion to OTP. I don't really see him ever falling out of the meta. So your time, putting your time on this champion is always going to like reward you. And then lastly, just talking a bit about, Diana. Again, I wasn't sure whether to put her in the A tier or, the low skill. But I think Diana, the more I coach and the more I watch, Diana's popularity and people play Diana, I do think Diana is a carry. I know that there's a tank build, which is obviously it's a little more forgiving, I would say, than, the carry build. This is always, of course, going to be preference. I think the carry build is better. And I think that just like Yi, you need to know how much damage you can do. You need to wait out fights. You need to, sometimes you can be the primary engage. But yeah, Diana is just another one of those super carries where you can farm really quickly. You can be the diff in a team fight if you play well, and you can just take over the game. So now let's talk about some solid or some underrated picks. So these champions, I would say, are not really on the same level as like the S tier, but they're still very, very, very strong. I think that these are also just, again, from what I've seen in terms of the win rates, I'm checking win rates from the previous patch. I'm checking win rates. Honestly, again, if you're not sure like what to play in your MMR and you are willing to kind of try anything, I think just look at the win rate of your champion in your specific rank and go, oh, okay, like this looks like something that I could find fun, and then just get your champ mastery. That's kind of like my best advice. So starting off in the A tier, we have Jax. Okay, Jax is a new kind of champ that's come up recently. And I think that Jax just had been slept on for a while and is now coming into the light. I think he's always been a pretty strong jungler. If you think about it, Jax literally counters every single auto-attacking champ. So yeah, he counters Jarvan, he counters Nocturne, he counters like everything that I'm like crossing off here. Jax just is good verse. So he has really, really good jungle matchups. And again, his win rate is super, super high. I think that this champion is not too hard. I think that, he's not as hard as like a Master Yi. However, you do need some, clicking, some micro, some auto attack spacing and these kinds of things when you play Jax. Moving on now to Jarvan. Now, Jarvan, I think, is a champion that, again, transcends meta. He is one of my mains. So I think that Jarvan is a great champion to learn and that you'll always be able to kind of play no matter what. He's very, very versatile as well, considering the fact that now, he kind of has this lethality build. So if you want to play him like a carry, you definitely can. I think the lethality build is, with Profane Hydra is actually really, really good. Again, his win rates, I'm basing this off win rates and my own kind of thoughts. I think his win rates show that even in bronze, I mean, obviously in bronze and silver, he's a little bit harder, but I would say he's a really, really great champion to play. If you are like platinum going into emerald, you're trying to find that push to diamond, I would say he's really, really worthwhile. He also has a lot of good resources like myself and people like a Gurin. Super solid always. Moving on to Nocturne, similar thing, just always super, super solid. This is not a champion where I don't think Nocturne is too much of just like a super 1v9 champion. But the thing about Nocturne is that he's very, very consistent. When you pick up Nocturne, you can really think about a very consistent, you're aiming for like that 55 to 56% win rate. Yeah, you're not going to be able to completely 1v9 games like a Master Yi or a Diana, but you are going to have a very consistent climb, which is why this champion, especially again, transcends meta. Super good champion just to main and have in your pool because, he plays that structured game as well. Full clear, use ult, make a play, reset, full clear, use ult. Yeah, I think Nocturne is super, super good, and the win rate is showing for that. Warwick. So the way I see Warwick is that, yeah, he's super, super good in the lower ranks. I think even in like Emerald, I still think he's pretty good. He's kind of just like a weaker Briar, which is why he's here. I think Briar is just like a better version of Warwick. But yeah, if you really like the games to be a bit more chaotic, if you don't like the idea of just full clearing and ulting and full clearing and ulting, of course you still will full clear as Warwick, but you can go a little bit crazier. You have a higher chance of he is a ganking jungler, and you could be a little bit crazier. His win rates are really insane, especially below platinum. His win rates are just absolutely unbelievable. So I would highly recommend champions like Warwick and Briar if you like to play the game a little bit crazier, and if you are below like Emerald. super, super good champs. Volibear, another staple. He has received a slight buff this patch because I think they over-nerfed him in the previous patch. The only reason he's not S tier anymore is because, yeah, his win rate did drop significantly. I'm not the biggest Volibear player, to be honest, but this champion is just a really solid, again, keeping good tempo, keeping a good structure, full clear stack drakes. You're super, super strong early, so you can really kind of snowball the game in terms of your early game fighting power. It doesn't fall off as hard anymore. There are some different versatile builds you can go with him. Yeah, he's a super good champ for like learning how to play jungle. He's a real true jungler, you know, kind of like Jarvan. Naafiri, now we're getting to the, you know, Naafiri had, you know, the time in the limelight for a little bit here. And I still think Naafiri is actually very, very good. I was checking her win rates, and I think that especially when I was looking at the win rates in like bronze and silver and iron, I think this champion is really, really good. I think this champion is not too difficult. I think her combos kind of make sense once you kind of understand. Yeah, it's also a super good champion in terms of the 1v1. Her clear is good. She kind of does a lot of things good. And she's an assassin as well. So if you kind of like these assassins, I think she's the best assassin to learn in terms of how easy it is, you know, compared to things like Zed and Talon. Naafiri is just really, really good as an assassin. And now we get to these little picks here. You guys may be questioning, maybe wondering. Okay, when I check the win rates of these champs, it is absolutely unbelievable. You know, looking at NAEU win rates, large sample size, I think they both have like between a 52 and 54% win rate, depending on what rank you look at. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, Teemo, still very underrated, very sleeper, very, very sleeper jungler. And I know, you know, some people may think, you know, I've lost my mind, but you know, if I just search Teemo win rate right here, right, and I just go to jungle and I go NA and I go bronze, you can see it has like a 52.5% win rate. You go to silver, 52% win rate. You go to gold, 52 point. So the win rate is actually, if you're looking for, you know, just for a bit of a different pick, 2,000 games, 54% win rate. Teemo, I think, is a champion that, you know, if you like that kind of play style, farms really well. He has really, really good objective control with the mushrooms. He has really, really good, like, kind of jungle 1v1 and matchup, similar to Jax, where you can just blind the Viego and just kill him. So Teemo is a champion that, you know, if you're looking for something a little bit different, that's still really, really strong and is shown with win rates that, you know, he proves it with the win rates that he's actually pretty good. Yeah, I would recommend Teemo. And finally, Rammus. So like Rammus is, you know, similar to Teemo, where I just like search up Rammus win rate here, and, you know, it's kind of just bonkers, especially for low elo, right? If I go to bronze, 51.5. If I go to silver, 52.4. So if you're looking for a champion that's just really, really good at ganking, if you're looking for a tank, you know, Sunfire got buffed this patch, which is another reason why I think that Rammus can be here, because he wants to build Sunfire Thornmail like first items. He doesn't really want to build like the Heartsteel kind of thing. Obviously, he is really, really good at countering 80 champs. So yeah, in some draft situations, you may struggle if you're trying to like play Rammus. I think that Rammus is definitely like, if you can just have him in your pocket, you know, he is very low skill expression. You kind of just roll in and taunt someone. But he is very, very effective, especially if you verse a bunch of 80 carries. So if you're versing like Caitlyn top or a Vayne top or like a Jayce top or something like that, and you're versing multiple 80 sources, or the enemy team is just stacking a lot of 80, you can just be like, yep, this is a Rammus game. He's going to do so well in those types of games. So that'll conclude what I think are, and what the win rates are showing, are kind of the best junglers right now to play to climb to diamond. I think, of course, again, as I said before, if your champion is not here, if I didn't talk about your champion, it does not mean that you cannot climb with that champion. Again, champion mastery and you improving at the game and understanding the game better is always going to kind of triumph over just picking what's meta. However, if you are feeling stuck, if something's not working for you, these are the champions that you can kind of go and test out. All right, and now we move on to the 8 new buffed junglers that Riot has introduced. Some of these junglers you could already play jungle. I have tested this morning all of their clear speeds, and we're just going to be talking about whether we actually think these champions are going to be strong as junglers, or if it's maybe just a bait, or if the champion was already strong and it's kind of just like a placebo buff where, okay, now that Riven's jungle got buffed, maybe she was always just a great jungler, who knows? So starting off with Malphite. So this is like, honestly, the first one that caught my attention. I think Malphite could already kind of be played as jungle. His clear speed was already good. So I'm immediately just saying that I think that Malphite jungle will be really, really strong. I think he'll have a really good win rate. I think that Malphite is a low skill expression champion. So especially below diamond, I think Malphite could work really well. I think because Malphite is very one-dimensional, kind of like a Rammus, where in high elo, I'm not too sure, but definitely below diamond, I think Malphite will be really, really strong. We'll see what kind of builds come out with Malphite. Got to cook up. I might cook up a video. It's going to be strong. I tested his clear as well. He's clearing like full clearing at like 310 with a smite. So, you know, jungle speed obviously doesn't mean everything, but you know, when Darius got buffed, right, and his clear speed was crazy, that champion immediately had like an insane win rate. Now moving on to Aatrox. So initially I thought Aatrox was like, I wasn't sure. I was like, yeah, Aatrox used to be a jungler, but like, I don't know. just feels like maybe a little bit of a bait in terms of like, okay, how much did his clear speed actually increase? Guys, let me tell you, Aatrox's clear speed is absolutely insane. He actually clears, in terms of my testing, he has the fastest clear speed out of all of these buff champions. I think Aatrox will 100%. Well, he will be a strong jungler. I think he's a little bit more difficult than the Malphite. However, I think that Aatrox is actually the champion that could be really, really good in the high elos. Of course, you can still play him in the lower elos. So if you know how to play Aatrox, and you know how to clear as Aatrox, I think Aatrox is going to be a really good jungler. Next up, we have Ambessa. So Ambessa was already a decent jungler, okay? I think that these are a little bit of like a placebo buff, where I feel like Ambessa is already good. And then I think people will just realize that, yeah, again, similar to Aatrox, where like, if you can play Ambessa and now her clear speed is good, similar to Aatrox, her dueling is really, really good. And I think that Ambessa will be a solidified jungler if these changes are not, you know, she'll just be a jungler and a top lane. I mean, the champion's just completely broken top lane anyway. There's no reason why it can't go jungle as well. Again, I think that Ambessa is going to reward people of the higher ranks who are a little bit better mechanically, who can combo a little bit better, who know how to push limits a little bit better. Okay, so here we go into some of the, you know, we're going to talk about Cho Gath next. So Cho Gath, I think, again, is a jungler that he could already jungle, and I tested his clear, and his clear is really, really good. So I actually think that Cho Gath will be a strong jungler. I think that Cho Gath, again, this is, I think, more for lower elo. I think Cho Gath will be really, really strong in terms of like his objective control, in terms of just an easy way to play the game. Full clear, eat a dragon, get really strong. You know, I think that maybe Cho Gath could build Sunfire, but again, obviously he's just going to build Heartsteel. So maybe Heartsteel and Sunfire is good. Tank junglers, I'm a little bit concerned about saying that they're going to be strong because I'm not 100% sure, but definitely for low elo, if you like Cho Gath, you should definitely try Cho Gath. I think he's going to be really strong. Okay, so now we get to the other side of the coin. So I actually think that Riven jungle is probably going to be bait for the most part. So similar to like how Silas jungle gets buffed in higher ranks, like if you can play Riven, if you're a Lois or something like that, and you know how to play Riven, sure, Riven jungle could work, but it probably could already work before the buffs, right? I think that Riven, you know, has too much strength in, you know, I don't actually think her dueling is that strong. Like compared to her Aatrox, it just kind of feels like a worse Aatrox to me, in my opinion. So I think that the Riven buff is probably bait. Can you play Riven jungle? Yeah, you can. Is the clear speed pretty, like, was the clear speed buffed? Yes, it was. I'm just not 100% sure I can say that it will be strong at this point. And that kind of goes the same for Jayce as well. Was the clear speed buff? Yes. Is Jayce a good jungler? No, like you can clear on Kai'Sa jungle pretty good. Obviously, some people play Kai'Sa jungle in high elos and make it work. Could I recommend that you should play Jayce jungle? No, probably not. Like it's probably just bait, but who knows? Who knows? I've been wrong before, but that's just my initial thoughts. Jayce is probably bait. And now getting into the ones that I really am not too sure about. I think that if you're going to play a tank jungle, they need to be really, really like, they need to have something really, really good that's going for them. I think the reason what makes Cho Gath actually good jungle is the fact that he has this smite secure. His clear speed is a little bit better than the Sion and the Ornn. So Sion and Ornn are going into the same category, which is just probably a bit of bait. LS is probably going to be making a video about Ornn jungle pretty soon. So, I mean, maybe we just wait for him to make a video about it or something like that, or wait for people to cook up something crazy. My experience is that I think Ornn could probably already be played jungle. This buff is not, you know, I've tested his clear speed. This buff is not really taking him to like why pick Ornn jungle over like something else, right? It's not taking me to that stage. So Ornn jungle is going to be probably a bait for me. Yeah, you can play it. Try it if you want. Of course, I would recommend you try all these champions and ruin some laners' lives by just trying things out. You know, it's Christmas, so just go have fun. Try out some champions. And then lastly, Sion. So Sion was a hard one. I think Sion, definitely this buff was like quite small to his clear speed again. This champion could already clear. The problem with tanks right now is that you need something, again, big going for you, because otherwise, generally, you just like kind of lose your agency in a game, because, you know, tanks generally have like a strong early game in jungle. However, in terms of you carrying the game, right, you kind of have to spike on your 1 or 2 items and make something happen before your clear speed kind of slows down and people just start getting items and you just start feeling really useless. So again, that's why Mundo, Rammus, and Cho Gath, they have these clear, strong kind of win conditions that you can play for and clear strengths. Yeah, you can play Sion jungle. Would I recommend it? No, I think it's probably bait. Could be wrong. I think all these junglers can honestly all these junglers except for like Riven and Jayce are playable, could be strong. But yeah, currently I think these are the ones we're going to look for in terms of actually strong junglers that will probably solidify themselves in the meta. And these ones we will have to see. So yeah, as I said, go out, have some fun, test these champions out. If you guys have any questions about any of this, leave a comment down below. Consider dropping a like, dropping a sub, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.